Hello and welcome to the Trading Bell. I'm Noah Kipkemboi. Today we are focusing on manufacturing. How do we reach the 2030 goal of 20% contribution towards the GDP from the current 7%? At the same time, what is the agenda and strategy for the year 2023? I'll be talking to Anthony Mwangi, the Chief Executive Officer of Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Let's take a look at his profile.
Anthony Mwangi is the Chief Executive, Kenya Association of Manufacturers. He's an accomplished professional with over 20 years of experience in government and regulatory affairs, public policy, public affairs, communication, stakeholder management and business development, cutting across various industries including transportation, ICT, aviation and oil and gas. Before joining KAM in August, he has worked at Bolt since November 2020 as the head of public policy for East Africa and the Horn. Previously, he was the Director of Government Public Affairs and Communication for Tullow Oil till March 2020. He has also served as the leader of IBM Government and Regulatory Affairs for East Africa from 2012 to 2015. Before IBM, Anthony worked for Kenya Airways as the head of Government and Industry Affairs for 7 years until November 2012. He has also held senior positions in various organizations, including Samsung Electronics and MFI Office Solutions.
Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Noah.
Now, starting off, I look at manufacturing, and it is one of the major drivers globally when it comes to changing and transforming economies. It holds so much potential, but for Kenya, it seems to be one of those not so tapped areas holding so much potential. So far, the year 2022, what are the biggest lessons that you've taken that you're carrying into the year 2023?
Thank you, Noah. And as you've mentioned, it is indeed a challenge that Kenyan manufacturing has been contributing, declining in terms of contribution to GDP to currently 70.2%. And if you look at our development proxies, that is a country that you compare ourselves with, you'll find that China contributes about 28%, Egypt is 30%, South Africa 14%, India about 15%. But Kenya has kind of faced a challenge over time, not because manufacturing itself is shrinking, it's because there are sectors that have been growing faster than manufacturing. Manufacturing, absolute numbers for manufacturing in 2022 grew by 6.9%. However, other sectors, the telco, banking, services, retail, they grew faster, and therefore that is why our contribution became low. However, doesn't mean that we are doing well. We could do more, and that is why we are 2023. We are now focused on what you're calling Kenya Manufacturing Agenda 20 by 30, which you've agreed with the government is the way to go. That means that we want, in 8 years, we want to high-grade manufacturing contribution from 7.2% to 20%.
That's quite it reminds me of Martin Luther King. They say, I have a dream. But for you to achieve a dream, you have to strategize and be intentional about that. So in terms of making that jump in the next 8 years, as you put it, Vision 2030, 20% contribution, what are we doing?
So, contrary to what perhaps we did in 2022 and perhaps 2021 and the years before, we have looked at and adopted what you're calling value chain approach. We have 13 productive sectors, and the 14th sector that supports manufacturing, the banking, the insurance, the ICT, and legal. But for the 13 sectors, we've mapped out all the opportunities and looked at if we're indeed going to grow from 7.2 to 20% in 8 years, that is 3x growth. You need to look at the sectors that can give you equivalent of or higher growth using the Pareto principle 80 by 20. So looking at all the sectors, we've mapped out and we have seen that indeed it is possible within that time frame to actually grow to 20%. How? I'll give you some examples, and quite interesting numbers. If you look at textile, our development proxy, or the comparator country that we are using on textile and apparel, is Bangladesh, because they've done it. Bangladesh, in terms of size, is kind of a subset of Kenya, maybe the size of central Kenya, with 170 million people. But they have been able to grow the apparel sector, and they're exporting over $50 billion to the world market, employing between 4.2 to 4.5 million people in that sector alone. Now, in Kenya, out of the size of the pie that we call the US market, which we have duty-free access, we have quota-free access, it is over $100 billion US. We are only exporting $550 million. It is a drop in the big ocean. Is it doable that we can do more? 20 by 30, we are looking at high grading that, growing that, $1.5 billion to $2 billion.
That's quite interesting, because when you talk about possibilities, there's so much possibility in this country.
Yes.
The willingness, at least setting up such infrastructure, it's one step closer to achieving that. But at the heart of the matter, the soul of the issue is the policies that we set and the implementation of those policies. In terms of manufacturing, has that been something that we are intentional about?
I think the policy environment in Kenya has been a big challenge. It has been patchwork of, work along as we go down the road. If you compare with other countries, you look at China, how they developed. They had a disastrous development and the experiments that they tried under their former leader between 49 and 78, the Mao Zedong, the big leap forward, in the defense-driven industrialization, the cultural revolution. Then come 1978, under Deng Xiaoping, and you can see that the golden years of China between 78 and 2010, only 44 years later, today, China has been able to get people out of poverty, hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. 44 years. We can be able to do that in the next 10 years because the hard infrastructure is there. If you go around the country now, we have trunk roads, we have feeder roads, we have power, we are generating power. Of course, it could be better and needs to be better. It needs to be affordable. But we can conclusively say that hard infrastructure successively has been put in place. What is lacking is the software, which is the policy, the regulatory framework, which is muddled by a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of regulatory overreach. That is what this 20 by 30 is attempting to do. If you look at in Africa, someone who has been a reference case, if you read the story of some great leaders of Africa that have been able to really transform their countries, and what comes to mind is someone like Thomas Sankara, a 32-year-old who was able to transform Upper Volta, rebrand the country from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, rebrand the people's psyche in terms of their values from people who perhaps do not have a common identity to Burkina-Base. Today, you find Burkina-Base are proud of their identity because it's an honorable person. Right?
Yes.
Moved literacy levels from 20% to high of 60s, 70s, was able to move from food deficiency to food surplus, 32-year-old in 4 years. So we can also, with the consistency, being very deliberate on how we put policies together to drive the growth.
Okay.
And it's not an option, because if you look at the employment challenge that we have, every year on average you're getting about 1 million people joining the labor market. Whether they dropped off at grade 1, grade 5, grade 8, now, CBC, high school, university, college, they are joining the labor market. If you go back and see 15 years, that every year we have a pipeline full of millions of people who are waiting to join the job market, we really don't have an option. We must put together the policies that will actually drive manufacturing. Definitely. Because that is where the engine of growth is.
Definitely. One of the issues...
And I'm very passionate about it.
Yeah, I know. I can tell, actually. And it's very important. And manufacturing, even by the term itself, it sounds like a heavy cup kind of, engagement. And it needs investment. Now, I've seen the president, while he was visiting the Nairobi Securities Exchange, talking about raising capital and investing in our very own. Now, there's the two approaches. There is getting, investors, people who already have the muscles to come and set up here in the country to boost the sector. And there is also the other option of using the stock exchange to raise capital. As manufacturers, how are you exploring these two options?
So we've seen the evolution of Nairobi Stock Exchange, and it's been tremendous. Of course, there have been quite a number of years where it's been a bit dry. We don't have a lot of IPOs. But if you look at Kengen, for instance, when it was listed at the counter, it elicited a lot of interest. So we haven't, because we look at manufacturing, you find there are big companies. Majority of our members are SMEs. Most of those big companies, find some are listed, some are not, others are family businesses. But I think there is a great opportunity for us to work with NSC to make sure that we are preparing even SMEs to list at NSC as an alternative source of capital. Because you've seen one of the biggest challenges that we always deal with is access to finance. How do you get capital to expand your business, to go to exports? And I think NSC provides us an opportunity, and perhaps the right time to start. I know engagements have been there, but we need to kind of be deliberate about that, so that our members can be able to know and be able to be educated how they can raise capital from NSC.